Saya masih coba hubungi ininya dulu, Pak.
Oke, siap. Ready. Saya ready. Sekarang tinggal prepare for this one first. Yes.
Pak Adi,
Ya.
apakah di waiting room ada Ludo ya? Ludovic Dume ada ya?
Wait. Am I host? Saya bukan. Oh ya, hostnya saya sudah ada. Oh, ada. Ludovic.
Dume.
Ya. Oke.
Okay. So because Amir will be late, I think. So
I will give the host to you, Pak Putu.
Okay.
You can also give us, me and also Sandra OIA as a co-host, Pak.
All right.
So we can help you for the technical things.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi Ludo.
For Ludovic.
Maybe still prepare something. Padi and Sandra, I have already made you as a co-host.
Thank you, Pak. Thank you.
Ya, Pak.
Ludo, we still cannot hear you.
No? Hello?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Let's change the speaker. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Thanks. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. Pak Adi and Mbak Sandra, can you help to arrange the participant in waiting room?
Okay. So I think first we will ask Dr. Ludovic to try his screen share.
Sure.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I will try to make Ludo as a co-host first.
Okay, no problem.
I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay, that's excellent. We can see it very fine.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay. Then I don't know about Putu, would you like to invite Dr. Ludovic to speak first and then question and answer, or we will wait for the second speaker to join, then we can do both, then question and answer, Pak?
I already email Ludo about this. I think we will hear both presenter first before we start the question and answer session.
Okay.
Is that fine, Ludo?
Oh, yeah, it's fine with me. I have a meeting at 12 p.m. my time sharp, so in 2 hours. But
Okay.
you know, as long as we are finished by then, because it's with management, so I cannot skip. But yeah, as long as we're finished by the clock, it's okay.
Okay. Okay.
So if we wait for the both speakers to speak first, then we should wait for the second speaker to join first, Pak.
Yes. Amir will join. I think in half an hour.
Half an hour, Pak.
Yes. He will join at maybe at 1:30.
Okay.
So I think after Ludo finish his presentation, I think Amir will be ready for his presentation, I think.
Okay. So what time do you want to start, Pak?
If we can start at 1, I think it will be good, I think.
Okay. At the moment, the participants are around 10.
Okay.
Do you want to wait until 5 past 1, or 1 is fine?
I think 1 is fine, I think.
1 is fine. Now is wait. So another 5 minutes, yeah, we will start.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Ludo, we will start in 5 minutes time.
Sure, nice.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ludo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Putu. I will take some water first.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the participants into the room by now. Thank you.
Okay, please do so. Thank you, Sandra. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Today, we are very glad that we will organize our Ubaya Global Webinar 2023, hosted by Chemical Engineering Department at the Ubaya Faculty of Engineering. In this webinar today, we will talk about microplastics and lithium, threats and opportunities. And we are very glad that today we will have two speakers. One is from United Arab Emirates, from Khalifa University, Dr. Ludovic Dumi. Good afternoon, Dr. Ludovic. How are you?
Good afternoon. Very good. Thank you. Yourself?
I'm also good. Thank you. He will talk about the microplastics within possible threats to biological systems. While on the second session, there will be another speaker from Australia, Dr. Amir Rasju, but he will join us a bit late, where he will talk about direct lithium extraction as his expertise. Also, this webinar is moderated by Dr. Putu Dodi Sutrisna. Good afternoon, Pak Putu.
Good afternoon, Pak Adi.
As we know, he is head of the Chemical Engineering Department at the Ubaya Faculty of Engineering. So the arrangement for this would be the two speakers will talk first, yes, Pak Putu, and then we will continue with question and answer. Okay, those who want to ask during the question and answer, you can directly ask by speaking directly, or you can type at the chat section. Both are fine for the moderator. Okay, now I give the time for Dr. Putu as a moderator to start moderating the session. Please, Pak, time is yours. I give the time to you. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you very much, Pak Adi, for the opening and time for me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for this webinar today. As Pak Adi said, that the webinar today has a theme of microplastic and lithium, threats and possibilities. Let me introduce myself. My name is Putu. I'm the head of Department of Chemical Engineering in University of Surabaya, or Ubaya. And before we start the presentation from our speakers, I would like to present a short curriculum vitae of Dr. Ludovic Dumi, or Ludo. Dr. Ludovic Dumi, or Ludo, is an assistant professor who joined Khalifa University in UAE in August 2020. He currently leads the CO2 utilization activities of the Research Center. He finished his PhD in 2012 from Victoria University in Australia, and then worked at several universities and research institutes such as Deakin University, the University of Melbourne, and the CSIRO in Australia, where he received many awards for his research activities. Ludo has published more than 180 peer-reviewed manuscripts in materials engineering, water, and separation-related journals. Ludo has special interests and has published many excellent papers in microplastic and nanoplastics. So it is our pleasure today that he will talk about microplastic in this webinar. As we know that our planet, especially Indonesia, has severe problems with plastic, including microplastic and nanoplastics, because both materials can endanger our environment and could prevent the sustainability of our life in the future. But how actually microplastic cause problems to us and how to tackle the problems? I think it is better for us today to learn and discuss it with Ludo. So Ludo, I think you can start your presentation, and we will have question and answer session at the end of our webinar. So Ludo, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Putu, also Putu, for the invitation to talk today. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to present some of the work we have been doing. I changed slightly the topic, and especially because we got some very recent results, which I wanted to share with you, unpublished. And I will talk about nanoplastics toxicity and how does that represent a challenge, but also a bit about the ability of nano and microplastics to act as platforms for bacteria, algae, and so on transportation at large scale. Okay, and if time allows, I will talk about the work of one of my former PhD students on microplastics remediation at the end. So yeah, that's a brief CV here. I think you've covered everything, so we don't need to go through that again. The thing I want to say here is that since I joined Khalifa University about 2.5 years ago now, I've been focusing myself on resource recovery from water and gas streams, looking specifically at ion recovery, lithium as one of the things as well I'm working on too, and extraction of proteins from bioeffluents, and also trying to develop materials in a sense that can support that transfer of fundamental science down to an application. So we are covering a number of topics in my group, and today I'm really focusing on the contaminants of emerging concern, the CECs, for microplastics as well. But we have some work on PFAS if that's of interest to anyone. The other key theme I'm working on too at the moment is very different, not so much materials or membranes or whatever. It's mostly on atmospheric water generation. We have a very large project in that space at the moment from the government of the UAE, looking at scaling up some of these technologies. So that's also a very interesting, I think, topic for Indonesia, because you have very humid, ecosystems, and so potentially that could be something of interest to you. I will not present that, but if you have questions or want to talk about these separately, I'm happy to do so. So today I will talk about initially the challenges arising from the toxicity of nanoplastics and microplastics. We published a paper just last year with one of my students and my colleagues in India, Dr. Radhe Sharma and Dr. Vandana Mishra, on the toxicological aspect of micro and nanoplastics, mostly focusing on microplastics because of the nature of the reports to date which are available. And as you may know, microplastics are becoming ubiquitous globally because of the plastic pollution of primary sources of microplastics, which are direct items released in the ocean, the water streams, or the air, but also as a secondary source from the fragmentation, degradation of microplastics under biological, mechanical shear, and UV/temperature stressors. So we know that polymers are degrading at specific rates, depending on their history and depending on their properties. And that is leading to smaller and smaller fractions of microplastics in oceans, especially. Obviously, we have a number of plastics which are being mass produced, polyethylene, polystyrene, PET, PP, and so on. And most of these polymers, given their processing conditions and their applications, will have also a number of additives or can be seen as co-contaminants. So the additives come from the manufacturing process directly, but also from the need to functionalize maybe these materials. But some co-contaminants will be uptaken by the microplastics over time as they diffuse, in a sense, across the different biomes, wastewaters, and so on. So a key challenge we have, and that's what Hor was doing here, is to assess the cumulative toxicity of both microplastics and co-contaminants present in wastewater. Okay, we have a number of synergistic behaviors which have been shown, and sometimes the co-contaminant limits the toxicity of microplastics, sometimes it does enhance. So it's a very complex matrix, and that meta-analysis that Hor has done, Harvin, was very good. So a number of factors would affect, obviously, this, and I will not cover all of them, but I will use some of the heat maps and discuss the directions that we believe the field should go for at the moment. If you have any specific question during the talk, you're welcome to ask, and I'm happy to stop and respond back to those. The first thing I want to highlight is that obviously the very large types nature of microplastics being released in the environment makes many analyses difficult, because when you collect microplastics on the beach, in the water, in sediments, or from airborne sources, you will very often have a mixture. Okay, so it is very challenging to actually link the direct toxicity of specific polymers, which are not meant to be toxicological per se, the polymers, to outputs, unless you have a model system, or unless you are able to extract very selectively the microplastics from a mixture, which you understand is challenging for a number of reasons. First, the density of these polymers is very similar, okay? Some are a bit lighter, like polyethylene, with around 0.9, let's say, of density. Some are a bit heavier, like Teflon, around 1.2 maybe. But at the end of the day, they have similar densities. The fact that these polymers are also relatively inert in terms of chemistry makes their selective capture a bit difficult. So we have many, many reasons for having troubles to actually collect them selectively and assess individually the impact of the shape, the size, and potentially the surface chemistry on the toxicological aspects. Now, what we can do, however, is still identify these polymers and class the types of co-contaminants we have in that case. And it has been shown, for instance, that heavy metals, especially in ocean and wastewater, are able to nucleate as metal oxides or metal structures onto the surface of a number of them, including polystyrene, PE, and PVC, for instance. And that's a big concern, because you can imagine how the uptaking microplastics in fish, for instance, could be challenging for the fish digestion system. But if now that microplastic is saturated with metal, you have another level of complexity, obviously. Sorry, someone is drawing on the screen right now. I'm not sure why. Okay, so another thing that has been shown to be occurring is the fact that some pesticides and pharmaceuticals, which are relatively hydrophobic, are able to actually diffuse again, either within the polymers or at least absorb very strongly onto the surface. These pose other concerns because they can actually enhance or accelerate the development of bacteria, which are potentially antibiotic resistant and so on, because you are concentrating them over time. So that's a major challenge here. And you can see that for many, many polymers which have been reported in literature as being occurring in nature, we have no data. So we don't know exactly what was on their surface. And that's my second message. We need a much more thorough analysis of what is being collected. Often people just look at the nature of a polymer and they look at the size and they stop. Besides this, in many cases, there will be also limitations related to the fact that we can only assess macroplastics down to maybe 10 to 15 micrometers. But the broad definition, which I really dislike very much, is that microplastics are defined as any plastic item of size less than 5 millimeters. But this is too broad, okay? Something at the milliscale, microscale, or nanoscale behaves differently. So we have to revise that definition. But you can see here that the majority of the reports are in the micron range. Some are in the hundreds of nanometers range, but very few, and hardly any are in the submicron level. Okay. So that's another challenge there. Now, some people have been looking at toxicological aspects for a number of days as well, with different model bacteria, algae, or even zebrafish that I will show you today. But again, the scope, and you can see all the gray box are lacking information. We are actually lacking behind, I guess, in terms of data, both for the polymers and for the additives. So the key message on that slide is that we must develop a more stringent and systematic matrix of assessment, and we must be able to extract more selectively these microplastics, assess more specifically the contaminants, and also be able to work on a larger or smaller fraction of sizes. Okay. Sorry, I just leave the screen because someone drew on that, so I just want to remove this. I don't think that's, not sure how it came through. Okay, anyway. So we have been looking in that meta-analysis at different, again, materials, contaminants, and target organisms. Looking at the different habitats we have here, they are freshwater, marine, terrestrial, or estuarine or aerial, airborne. Looking at different types of animals, if they are mammals, fungi, bacteria, and so on. And also looking, in a sense, at the nature of the types of animals being tackled. So fishes are the most used and reported type of species to date, but some mollusks, mussels, and so on also have been used as model animals to assess the uptake and the impact, and to see if the level of toxicity is synergistic or if it is actually antagonistic, or there is no reported obvious effects on any part of these animals. So in short here, we have been looking at 5 levels, going from the molecular level, cellular, organ level, organismic, and population level, to try to understand transfer of microplastics from the different levels to another, but also trying to understand the true impact of both microplastics and surface contamination onto the toxicological effects. So I refer you back to this manuscript if you want more details, but I give you the short conclusions there on this right now. That is, yes, we need more data. There is scope for pushing further the understanding, especially in endangered ecosystems where species are already under major stress. We need to understand how these microplastics can support transfer of contaminants across long distances. And this is actually one of the core projects we have here on microplastic right now in Khalifa University. We have been looking at the transportation of microplastics primarily from the Indian Ocean down to the Arabic Peninsula coastline to understand to link these transportation mechanisms to the currents, airborne and water currents, and also to understand the transport of bacteria and other types of microorganisms on the surface of these microplastics. Because while we have demonstrated toxicological effects of some microplastics, again, on some organs, bacteria, organisms, and so on, we also know that these microplastics can be colonized by bacteria and by algae and fungi. And that could actually lead to sprouts of invasive species in areas where they are not natively present, these organisms. So we have been looking at this and developing some understanding on the toxicity at the nano level and macro level, like I will show you now, of these microplastics on zebrafish in that case, and also trying to understand how we can control the adhesion of some bacteria and some fungi onto the surface of the microplastics to use them as model contaminants later down the track for the assessment of their toxicological and impacts, and also on the impact on wastewater or desalination processes. So this slide here shows you the first work we published a couple of years ago now on the fact that we're demonstrating for the very first time the fragmentation of microplastics at very low shear stress. The story here, and I will show you her picture later from Marie, my former student, was that she started to work with commercial microplastics extracted from face scrubs. And these face scrubs were one of the last few items where primary microplastic sources with a size below, let's say, 5 micron were being sold off on the market as a beauty product. And she found out very quickly that the distribution of sizes of her microplastics was changing rapidly depending on the stirring conditions or the pretreatment conditions. So we assessed that. We did demonstrate that the microplastics could break down into nanoplastics very quickly, and then try to understand the impact it have on the management of the microplastics themselves. But in this study, we also evaluated the impact of microplastics on zebrafish embryos to understand how the microplastics of different particle size could actually diffuse across different organs, brain, the eyes, and a number of suborgans in the system there to see if it would lead to necrosis or to characterize here, like you see on the graph, the number of apoptotic cells So cells which have been damaged in a sense by the presence of the of these microplastics. So we did different dose matrix going at high concentrations and low concentration levels, and we could demonstrate that indeed we had a very strong impact based on the control groups on the number of apoptotic cells in the system. One of the things that came through is that the smaller particles, so nanoplastics around 55 nanometer in particle size, the distribution was from 40 to 70, okay? Were actually much more cytotoxic compared to the larger micron size particles, which again reinforces the fact I was highlighting before that we must have better understanding of the distribution of these nanoscale particles onto the systems. And when they are mixed into complex matrices, it's obviously very difficult. Moving forward, we have been looking at another aspect, which is related to nanofibers and microfibers. Because in fact, the majority of the reported microplastics in numbers are fiber-based structures. They come from the shading of clothing, in a sense, and some microplastics, or let's say fibers released, can be cellulosic-based or can be based on natural polymers, so they probably don't have so much impact. But many others are based on synthetic polymers, again, like polystyrene, polyethylene, and so on, and those are the ones of concern. So we've been mapping, based on available literature, reported densities and concentrations of microfibers in that case, from about 100 microns in diameter down to about 5 microns in diameter across the globe. And this is a very recent, we have submitted that paper only a few weeks ago, very recent survey that shows that we have a number of reports globally. We can see also we are missing data. Many areas have not been mapped out for microfibers or even nanofibers at all. And the areas of highest level of pollution are obviously often linked to the largest urban centers, as you could expect, but also, again, to areas where we have major currents, where accumulation of microplastics coming from very far regions can occur. Okay? So that's a major thing. Like some reports in the ocean on very isolated islands have shown very large concentrations of microplastics because of the fact that some currents actually converge here and therefore bring microplastics from here, maybe Southeast Asia, the Sub-Indian continent, and the eastern part of Africa. So just as an example here, we know that what we record, even at the source of pollution, let's say, next to a major metropolitan city, is not representative of what is on average across the globe in the wastewater or in the seawater in that case. Okay. We moved on with this work on the microfibers to try to understand with my different colleagues, so Jan Gilbert and Madeleine Logan from Mississippi State University and my formation in Mari, to capture how we could generate microfibers of fixed model diameter and length to then use them for cytotoxicological studies. So like I mentioned before, we did the zebrafish work on the microplastics, which were breaking apart in a sense very easily. So we try to define, again, a model here that we could control. And it's a bit more challenging to generate micro nanofibers at fixed diameter and length, as you can imagine, compared to particles. So we have to develop a brand new technique based on electrospinning and freeze drying of the material prior to cryosectioning to generate very narrow distributions. And in the end, we managed to get a range of fibers, but here I'm showing you two of them with a diameter around 200 nanometer and up to 550 or 40 nanometers, but we had also much larger fibers. The alignment of the fiber was quite decent, so we have actually a very narrow length distribution compared to what we could buy or get otherwise on the market, which is still around 50% of the length. So it's not perfect, but at least it gives us something we can utilize afterwards for filtration studies, like I will show you, but also for toxicological studies. So we did a very similar study, like I did show you on the nanoplastics, nanoparticles with nanofibers, looking at PET, again here, nanofibers, and at different concentrations, low and on par with some of the medium high, I would say, in this area, densities of microfibers in the reported in the ocean. And we did again tests on embryos to understand the two things. First, the diffusion into the embryos and necrosis. that could be happening. But then also Jan and Madeline went way further, tried to understand the genomics of the system to see what was triggering inflammation across these embryos. And so they analyzed the density of neutrophils and macrophage, which are actually agents produced by the body to protect yourself. And based on the type and the number produced over time, they can identify if inflammation, which is visible on here on the embryo, is related to either a virus or to a physical or chemical contamination. So they have been doing that analysis with us, and now we are about to publish this work very soon. But the point here is that we could actually demonstrate that the impact of the microplastics of the nanofibers, was massive on fish embryos. And we have shown also that macrofibers from textile PET fibers can break down very easily in such nanofibers. So two messages here, but you can see that it's quite important to consider them overall. One of the most striking results, in my view, is the penetration of the nanofibers into the bloodstream and also the accumulation onto the spinal cord of a fish. Okay. Now we are trying to do some brain autopsy to try to understand how much, if any, get into the brain tissues, and if it could affect, obviously, the development of the embryos over time. But whatever happens on fish can be easily translated to many other species, eventually also, unfortunately, human. So we have to be careful here. We are not saying this happens on human, but we want to make sure we capture better the impact of these microplastics on the development of embryos. The next step for us is to do, as I was showing you in the paper from Hoare, to now modify these nanofibers with specific contaminants, antibiotics, metals, and so on, and look at the synergistic relationships between the two. But like I said at the start, sometimes microplastics promote growth of bacteria or their transport. And another project I have here is actually related to that transportation aspect, to understand how bacteria, algae, and so on can colonize microplastics in ocean and then being transported. So we have been doing some work here with colleagues at King Abdulaziz University in Saudi, and my staff here, CC and PhD in Hoare, to understand how we can control on model microplastics like these spheres, which are about 4 to 6 micrometers in diameter, the grafting or the attachment of bacteria. So we use E. coli here, okay? And the idea is that the attachment of these bacteria can be depending on the chemistry of the microplastic alone, okay? And also on the conditions of growth which we are being exposed to. So we are analyzing the biofilms which are being generated by these bacteria and onto the matrix of microplastics. And now we did very recently some cross sections. You can see the microplastics across the cross section here, and we can actually reveal the bacteria formation and network between the EPS and the cells across that that matrix. So nice work, non-published, but very recent, and we are pushing forward now the analysis to control better the grafting of these bacteria, and also to control better the density to do later filtration tests, mostly onto the with these model laminates to understand their impact on desalination pretreatment and wastewater pretreatment steps. Now I just wanted to have a few slides on what initiated all this work with Dr. Judy Lee and Marie Enfrin. Judy is a senior lecturer at the University of Surrey in the UK, very good friend from my PhD time, and Marie was our joint student, PhD for about 4 years. And so obviously at the time, it was in 2015, I think we started, the plastic pollution was known, but the number of studies on the impact of microplastics alone on filtration systems was still very limited. So we had actually to develop a number of, I would say, pioneering studies in that space to try to understand better if they were causing any issues to wastewater or desalination treatment systems, and if that was the case, how we could produce or generate solutions to manage them better. I explained to you what secondary sources are, which are arising from the degradation of primary plastic sources, and this was really the purpose we had, because we knew that anything like this is not a major issue. I mean, you can collect them, but when they start to break down, this is where we have actually more issues of impact with biological matter and so on. So we looked, because my background is in membrane separation primarily, so we look at which step in any wastewater or desalination process could be affected. And we focused on micro and ultrafiltration for the time being, because anything NF or RO would be protected by one of those membranes. So there is not strong reasons to believe that the microplastic could pass through these membranes and diffuse down to the RO level. But reaching the MF or UF is quite possible, because some of the pretreatment like coagulation, AOPs and so on are not always effective in removing them. And it has been reported that up to 87% only, I guess, of microplastics can be rejected if they are larger than 10 micrometers. But anything below that has not, until we did these studies, was not evaluated at all. And what issue can they bring? Well, one of the major things is that when microplastics accumulate or clusters, they can generate fouling layers, and they can again absorb proteins, biological matter, or whatnot, and generate a cake layer on the surface of the membrane, leading to pore blocking and decrease of performance. At the same time, we have seen as well that kind of some physical aberration of these materials with a high shear stress caused by the flow rate of water containing these microplastics on the surface of the membranes, leading to defects and premature loss of performance. So the key things there which we looked at is those four, I would say, scopes. How can we improve detection? And there is no standard method right now. It's just starting to come up, but it's very difficult. What's the impact of fragmentation? What's the impact of the microplastics on the processes? And obviously, how can we characterize the toxicity, like I was showing you before, of these microplastics? So we use this phase scrub, extracted the polyethylene particle there, which were quite broad, and then characterized the particles, and found quickly that we had fragmentation, which was a major issue. So we looked at controlling this fragmentation and then generated microplastics of fixed diameters, around 93, 95 nanometers, and we used them for water filtration purpose. I will not go through all the details there, but if you have any, we have published that, but if you have any questions, you can come back to us and ask after. But I want to highlight two things. So here, for instance, you can see this is the surface of a membrane, UF membrane, interfiltration, after filtration with pure water. A couple of dust things here, but quite pure, the surface is quite nice. After filtration with microplastics in the solution, you can see how the surface is affected and how obviously after 48 hours, okay, the accumulation of microplastics on the surface of the material. So to tackle that, and this led obviously to some decay, influx, very strong changes from the fouling occurring. So to tackle this, we developed two strategies. First, me being a material person, we try to modify the surface of the membranes to actually make them more repellent or adsorptive for microplastics. So we try to control the molecular interactions between the two. But also we try to understand how we can affect the flow of microplastics in the vicinity of the membrane surface to prevent, potentially, their adhesion. So we look both at surface chemistry control and gas cleaning or air scourging in that case. There are a number of solutions in terms of membrane modifications, and we selected 3 monomers to be able to fine-tune the charge of the membrane eventually, looking at both acrylic acid-based, amine-based, and silicone-based polymers. We did some trials to optimize the system. I will not go into all the details there, but let's just say we could actually generate composite membranes with different thicknesses of each polymer to have the same nominal flux and same very, very close surface roughness and morphology. Okay. However, despite having a similar morphology, a similar roughness, and adjusting the flux to be in the same range, we could find that the surface charge, obviously the stirring potential, was very different. And that makes sense. The polymers we are adding on the surface by plasma deposition here of the membrane are very different. So we had the acrylic acid membrane, which was always very negatively charged across the broad range of pH. We aim for 6 to 8, obviously, but we could get some of the amine-rich membrane to be very much more positively charged. So we can have a direct impact on the potential behavior, absorption, and maybe transfer even of some contaminants across the membranes. We did the fouling studies just like before, and we could find also the amount, the cumulative amount of microplastics adsorbed was varying a lot, and we had two control groups. The membranes having the silica, silicon, sorry, and the neat PSF polymer had much more absorption. The other two had much less. So changing and controlling the charge to have more extremes seemed to be helping to repel some of these microplastics. However, you could still find some fouling. When the PSF was very badly fouled, both the acrylic acid and the amine-rich monomer were okay, and the HMDSO also had a lot of fouling happening. Just to clarify, this first membrane, the pristine one, is relatively hydrophobic and has a negative charge. The acrylic acid is relatively hydrophilic, but has also a negative charge. The CPM is very hydrophilic and has a positive charge, and the HMDSO is very hydrophobic and also has a negative charge behavior. So you can see the relationships which make sense across this series. Then we move down to the air scourging and optimization from a fluid mechanics point of view. And I will skip the details, but we looked at different air injection ratios across the system to try to see if we could actually improve the mixing of the microplastics over time. And we use the same membranes there, modified and pristine, to look at the benefits of these treatments to reduce the amount of microplastics absorption over time. And we had major changes. So the acrylic acid and the CPAM with the amine groups were much cleaner after air scourging. Even the DPSF was much better. For the HMDSO, the silicon base, it was less obvious, but all the others showed significant improvement of fouling behavior over time. We developed different models to explain the behavior based on the gas scoring input ratio, and also based on the adhesion forces between the particles, polymer, and the materials. And then we moved down to the nanofibers aspect where we did the filtration. So same nanofibers I was showing you before on the toxicological aspect. We use them for the filtration purpose, and we actually got very different results. We found out that the nanofibers were leading to much stronger decays of flux across the same membranes due to the fact that they were packing better. We actually expected the opposite, and we were very wrong. And we're actually the opposite because we thought that the particulate matter could actually generate a denser cake, while the fibers could be more randomly dispersed. But in fact, we found that the clusters being generated were very dense, and that in fact we had lots of alignments generating much tougher clusters overall. Again, we try to understand the clustering conditions and the cake layer formation across the systems to predict better the impact of the fiber diameter and also on the long-term performance of the system. I will not show you the data here on the scoring, gas scoring, because I think it becomes too much. But this is really another thing which we have been trying to optimize further. That is to manage at a much finer level the interaction between the microplastics and those membrane surfaces. Now, like I said at the start, we have different directions. We try to work with more realistic particles and feed streams. We have a survey ongoing to extract microplastics or nanoplastics if it can be found from different wastewaters in the peninsula with our colleagues in Saudi. We are also looking at different filtration processes. At the same time, looking at the impact of the contamination, surface modification of microplastics through how it affects, in a sense, the behavior, infiltration, absorption, and other types of pretreatments. And the core thing for me right now is to look at the impact of biosolvents and biocontamination. We have been doing some projects on membrane bioreactors, and I'm not presenting that here, but we have published that also last year. We looked at the impacts of microplastics on the biome present in the MBR itself. And again, we had actually two different trends. On one hand, we had some toxicological effects, and the microplastics were killing some bacteria. But on the other hand, the microplastics were helping with the mixing of the MBR, so improving aeration and so on. So it's interesting that the performance actually improved overall, despite the fact that we had some direct toxicological issues arising on the MBR. That's it for me today. I would like to thank my colleagues, especially Julie from Surrey, Yan from Mississippi State University, and also my colleagues from University of Delhi, with my joint student with Harvin. Some of his work was done in Duke University. The majority was on here for the later stage in Khalifa. Some industry partners for the project we have right now in Khalifa. Before I wrap up, I want to let you know we are co-organizing a conference with some colleagues, which is the Membrane Desalination 2023, hosted and organized by Elsevier, this November in Sitges, Spain. If you are interested to join, let me know. The abstract call is still open for the next 6 weeks, I think. So we are happy to get any papers related to pre-treatment for the desal or desalination, if that's in your area of expertise. Thank you very much. I will be happy to take questions now if you want, Putu, or later at the end of the session.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ludo, for your excellent presentation about microplastics. I acknowledge that you will have a meeting at 2 p.m., right?
Yes, in about 1 hour and a bit. Yes, I have to be leaving sharp.
So I think we will change a bit the rundown of the webinar. I think we move into the question and answer for Ludo first, and then we will continue with a presentation from Amir. Is that fine?
For me, it's fine.
Okay. In the chat room, we have one question from Miss or Mrs. Ina Narayani. She asked about plastic that has already been changed into asphalt. Is it still producing microplastics, do you think, Ludo?
It's a very good question. Before I answer, I want to say that people do many things, okay? And human beings, as a species, we are very good at doing the wrong thing first. And then maybe we learn from our mistakes. I don't know if we do always, but sometimes we do. And the issue of plastic pollution has led a number of governments globally to look for fast solutions. Meaning, okay, we have so much plastic waste, we can recycle, we can repurpose. That's the whole concept of the circular economy, but that's the topic for another talk. And we can maybe manage to, repurpose some of it, but some we can't, especially the thermoset plastics. So yes, having said that, people have been using microplastics in building materials to make bricks for houses. We had a project on that before, which was a very challenging one, to make pavements for pathways, to make, like you say, asphalt or bitumen in roads. And I believe, based on what I've read recently, that indeed, and some colleagues working at RMIT in Australia on that very topic of asphalt in cooperation with microplastics, that the fact that you put microplastics in, or plastic materials in the bitumen, in the asphalt, is actually leading to the release of microplastics when the asphalt is being worn off by the cars. So we are probably storing plastics into a material which is not resilient enough to store them for a very long time. I'm not saying that there is diffusion of contaminants, or that it might be improving the performance of some asphalts or bitumen. I don't know initially, but for sure, when you wear off these materials, the plastics have to go somewhere, right? And my former PhD, Mari, is now working on such project on the evaluation of microplastics next to roads, where mixtures of polymers have been added to the roads for a number of years in Australia as an additive, and to try to manage waste materials. So I believe that this is one of these not so great ideas, some may say, and that there will be consequences on the environment at some point. So I'm not sure if I'm completely answering your question. That's my statement, man.
Okay, thank you, Ludo. To Mrs. or Miss Ina, do you still have a question related with your previous question? Is that fine with you?
Thank you very much for the answer. Thank
Okay.
you.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we move into the second question from Professor Likariati. Please, you can ask your question directly to Ludo, please.
Yes, Prof. Ludo, it was a very nice presentation. Actually, I was a little bit late listening your presentation, but if I'm not mistaken, you try to investigate the microplastic concentration in the human tissue. Is that correct?
No, not human tissues.
In the blood or what?
No. We worked on zebrafish so far.
Oh, in the fish. Okay. So when you do that, do you have to take do you need to take the blood from the fish?
No, so here we use zebrafish embryos. So we cannot collect the blood from the fish, they are too small. We look at the diffusion of the microplastics or nanoplastics for that matter across the materials. We tag somehow the plastics, and then we can look at the accumulation levels and where they go, and also how they impact apoptosis of the cells.
Okay. So it means that you try to look at in the fish tissue and just do the qualitative analysis. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Lika. Is there any question? Any other question from the audiences? Okay. Okay. There is another question in the chat room from Dr. Ong. Can microplastic be generated during membrane filtration, for example, due to water pressure, air scourging, or other cleaning method?
Excellent question, actually. I don't have the data, so I cannot give a full answer. But we have been analyzing in our system with the microplastics we have generated the size distribution. I'm not showing that here, but we had a device called a nanoparticle tracking analyzer, an NTA, which is very precise. And we were analyzing 100% of the water getting inside the module and 100% of the water getting outside the module. So we had statistics on the size distribution. When we had these 55 nanometer or so microplastics, we could not detect any significant statistical changes of size distribution over time for the test we performed with the UF membranes. Okay. For the nanofibers, we could not use the same system. We used algorithm-based analysis. And again, we had only a couple of % of variation over time, which was also oscillating around a mean value. So my short answer is that maybe it can happen, but we haven't seen that into our testings. Okay. Now, I think the membrane process could be leading to some, as you mentioned very rightfully, issues of stress from the pressure. However, when the fibers or the plastics are in the water, the system is in isobar condition, right? So you would expect only damage or fragmentation if there is an impact with a static system. So for instance, impact of microfibers with the metal tubing in the system, or impact of the fibers or microplastics with the membrane surface. But in the solution itself, the plastics are just pressurized. They won't be damaged. What could happen besides the membrane process, and this has been shown, is that the pretreatments in terms of advanced oxidation processes, in terms of maybe UV treatments, ozonation, and even maybe coagulation, I'm not sure, could actually lead to some damage. So some chemical or physical pretreatments, I am sure they do affect that. The membrane alone, it might depend on the hydrodynamics and on that density of contacts of heats between the plastics and the surfaces. That's my answer.
Thank you, Ludo. Is there any further question from Dr. Ong?
Nice.
I think So I think it's fine. Okay. So I think we already have question and answer session for Dr. Ludo. And once again, thank you very much, Ludo, for your excellent presentation for today's webinar in Ubaya. Thank you very much for your time. And I think we have to give an applause to Ludo for his presentation.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure. It was nice to be here today.
Okay, thank you, Ludo. So now we move into the second session, where the second session will be from Dr. Amir Ramzu. And before Amir presents his presentation, I would like to present Amir's curriculum vitae. Hello, Amir. How are you?
Hey, Putu. How are you? I'm good. Good. Thanks.
Hi. Okay. Amir is a lecturer in the School of Engineering at Edith Cowan University in Perth, Australia. He is also leader of Mineral Recovery Research Center at School of Engineering in Edith Cowan University. Amir is also board director of the Membrane Society of Australasia, or MSA, and an editorial board member of the Journal of Desalination. He has about 10 years of expertise in surface nanoengineering and membrane technology, with more than 150 refereed journals, and most of his papers are in high-ranked journals such as Nature Communication, Journal of Membrane Science, Desalination, and many other prestigious journals. In 2014, he was announced as finalist in the Australian Museum's Eureka Awards because of his contribution to desalination using hydrogel-assisted forward osmosis technology. Amir was awarded the prestigious and highly competitive 2021 University of Technology Sydney Cancer Research Fellowship, and also have secured national and international research grants and partnership. He has been actively developing lithium-ion membrane since 2017 and published several papers in this area. In terms of topic today, Amir's topic is a little bit different than Ludo's topic, but I think his presentation will be very interesting because Indonesia and other countries in the world are now trying to change from fossil fuel vehicle into electric fuel vehicle that require lithium as the source for its battery material. So I will kindly please Amir to present his presentation about lithium extraction. So Amir, the time is yours. You have around 40 to 45 minutes to present your presentation. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Putu. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So let me share my screen.
Yes, please.
Great. All right, so today my talk is about the direct lithium extraction, and thank you for Putu for your introduction. So I skipped the part of introducing myself. The interesting thing about Indonesia is that currently one of the main source of nickel is from Indonesia, and it's another topic that I probably need to discuss sometimes with refer to ESFs and what's going on in Indonesia regarding nickel. But anyway, so today my talk the focus is around the lithium, and as you can see here, this is a typical gigafactory which produces 30 gigawatt hours of NCM lithium-ion batteries. For a typical gigafactory, we need somewhere around 19,000 tons of nickel, 6 tons of cobalt, 25 tons of lithium per annum, and around 80,000 tons of synthetic graphite or flake graphite per annum. So basically, currently, we have somewhere around 300 of gigafactories in pipeline. The majority are in China, around 226, We have 1 in Australia, 24 in South Asia, 30 in Europe, and 23 in the US. This is a very interesting. Let me show you my laser printer. So as you can see here, this is the amount of the increase in the price of lithium, and since 2021, the price has jumped significantly, and the percentage increase in critical battery raw materials cost since Jan 2021 is around 900. So to meet the world's lithium requirements, we require 74 new lithium mines with an average size of 45,000 tons by 2035. And since mines take at least 5 years to build, these mines will need to be in operation by 2033. And that's around 59 lithium mines up and running in just over 10 years. So I should point out here that Australia is set to remain the dominant producer of lithium in this decade, and there are currently over 13 lithium mines producing lithium containing spodumene, over 75% of which is refined in China. This is a value chain, and as you can see, as you move towards upper side of the upstream of the value chain, the value of the lithium from 11 billion by 2035 increases to over $7 trillion by 2035. So it's a very interesting graph from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. In June 21, the value of Australian export of lithium was around $90 million. In June 2022, last year, it surpassed $1 billion. So it's a significant increase from $90 million to over $1 billion of Australian export of lithium. These are the statistics showing the brine deposition and hard rock deposition. Currently, 75% of the deposit globally belongs to brine, either in a form of continental or the geothermal or oil field brine. Around 24%, 25% of the deposits are in the form of hard rock, mainly in the form of spodumene, which is mainly in Australia. So this is a very interesting graph. As you can see here, the brine by 2025, the brine and the portion of brine becomes sort of 50% of the market, as the technologies for extraction of brines getting more advanced towards 2025. So as I said, there are two main sources of lithium: brine mine and hard rock mining. The majority of brines are in Atacama in South America, in Chile, and also in Chile, Argentina, and also in the rock. This is a typical hard rock mining from mines. It's a Greenbushes mine in south of Perth in Western Australia. So in terms of processing, brine processing is basically currently based on the concentration of brine by solar and wind evaporation in large pounds, and then it is treated to remove calcium and boron by adding sort of age reagents. The advantage of this conventional evaporation process is the cost. Is very cost effective by exploiting the climatic conditions, low OPEX, and easy to explore. The main disadvantage is large land footprint, depletion of aquifer, 1 to 2 years of production, and high capex. This is a typical spodumene processing. The process usually comes with the mining, crushing, grinding, acid roasting, and impurity removal. The main advantage is commercially proven, it's quick to ramp up, and it requires shortened engineering time. The main advantage is its high consumption of acid and base, high emission and base, and large footprint. So this is a typical flow sheet of the hard rock spodumene mining. So it's a start from mining, crushing, grinding, and all the way to producing concentrate. And then the concentrates goes to the refinery process, which goes to multiple calcination at 1100 degrees C and acid roasting at 250 degrees C, and addition of some neutralization and filtration, impurity removal, and finally producing lithium hydroxide. It's a typical lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate flow sheet production. So it's a very interesting graph showing the capex. So for brine mining, usually it takes is usually what requires $1 to $2 million for whereas for hard rock it requires $1 to $50 million for prospecting and exploration. And as you can see, going all the way down to construction and production, the amount of capital for brine is 150 to 300 mil, whereas that value substantially increases for hard rock mining to 250 to $2 billion. Well, this is very interesting. As you can see here, this is the carbon footprint of lithium production. And for brine, it produces somewhere around 5 tons of CO2 per 1 ton of lithium hydroxide. For rock in Australia, we produce somewhere around 15 tons of CO2 per 1 ton of lithium hydroxide. In terms of water footprint, brine requires somewhere around 470 tons of water per 1 ton of lithium. And in rock process, it requires 170 tons of water per 1 ton of lithium. Anyway, so you can see there is a significantly high hard carbon and water footprint. Therefore, there is a continuing quest in industry to invest in new lithium recovery method, which has low carbon or zero carbon, low water footprint, and is scalable, inexpensive, and working on low quality feed as well. So, the question is, one of the main sources of technologies that are now evolving around lithium technology and lithium extraction is DLE. So DLE stands for dielectric lithium extraction. Let's quickly go back why we need why DLE now and what happened to the well, in terms of time series. So previously, before the lithium boom, the conventional way of extraction of lithium was mainly limited to rock side. So thermochemical solid rock technology was until up 2014, where the evaporation brine came into play, and it wasn't enough because, as you can see, the demand for lithium jumped significantly, and DLE came into play. So basically, DLE is the core concept of DLE is based on sorption, ion exchange, and solvent extraction. These are the conventional technologies that have been around in desalination, water and wastewater purification. Now, the industries try to use those already established technologies in other areas into DLE for lithium recovery. So this is a typical DLE process. So lithium extracted using adsorption, ion exchange, solvent extraction, and membranes. So the main advantage of that one is brine returns can be retained into the aquifer. It's a fast processing. It requires very small footprint. And the main disadvantage of this one is that the technology is expensive. So this is typical brine processing for DLE. It starts from the pre-treatment and then goes into different concentrated lithium chloride solution and finally producing battery-grade lithium hydroxide. So in terms of land footprint, this is very interesting. So, and it's a conventional extraction of lithium from evaporation. It requires somewhere around 170 square kilometers, and this is the hard rock land footprint is 20 kilometers for extraction of lithium from hard rocks, and whereas it is for DLE, we just need less than 1 square kilometers to produce a similar amount of lithium chemical. And you can see this, there is a significant reduction in terms of land footprint. In terms of water footprint, the DLE is more or less similar to hard rock. It's somewhere around 50 tons of water per 1 ton of lithium hydroxide. In terms of carbon footprint, as you can see, the carbon footprint is ranged from for DLE 0 to 5. And it's very interesting. Sometimes we have zero carbon consumption, and the main reason is that because if you, for example, if you extract the lithium from geothermal brine, for example, you can use the energy from geothermal brine to extract the lithium. So that sort of you break even in terms of CO2, and you the carbon footprint would be much lower. In terms of OPEX, and this is a hard rock mining, as you can see, the OPEX is significantly high, 51,000 per 1 ton of lithium. In brine process, that value reduces to $5,360, and in brine, that value is even lower, $3,142 US dollar per 1 ton. So as you can see, in terms of OPEX, DLE is very more efficient. So what is DLE? In a very simple way of putting in simple words, so this is a typical flow sheet for conventional extraction of lithium from brine. Basically, with DLE, you can remove all of those stages, and you can add sodium carbonate to produce lithium carbonate. So this is basically what does DLE do in extraction of lithium by bypassing all of those energy-intensive unit operations. So in terms of concept, working principle, we have two types of lithium DLE. The first one is removing the impurities from lithium or removing lithium from impurities. So current, as I said, current DLE technologies are based on sorption, ion exchange, and solvent extraction. The TRL of these technologies are pretty much high. For sorption is 9, ion exchange is 8, and the solvent extraction is 7. Membranes are now it's a new sort of it's pretty much new. The current TRL is low; it's around 4, but it's growing so fast in the industry. So as you can see, this is a very interesting comparison table showing the main advantages and disadvantages of DLE. And for sorption, the main there are some inherent limitations. For sorption, for example, it requires high temperature, brine contamination. For ion exchange, we have acid and basic, lots of acid and basic reagents. In solvent extraction, we have some environmental implications. Whereas for membrane, we don't have that sort of issue. That's why membranes are so attractive these days to be used as a core technology for DLE. And the main reason is because there is no contact between brine and extrusion. However, the bottleneck in developing the ion selective membranes are high lithium selectivity versus permeability, membrane chemical, thermal, mechanical, long-term stability, scalability, and cost. So, from now on, I'm gonna with that introduction, I'm gonna dive into what we did in terms of research in the last 6 years, heavily investing in lithium extraction and making lithium selective membranes. So we have used a variety of building blocks: graphene oxide, metal organic framework, COF, mixing, LDH, clay processes. So in terms of graphene oxide, so the main the feature that graphene oxide has, it's the functional groups. There are lots of functional groups on the graphene oxide. So by altering the functional group, you can alter the inner layer distance and the spacing, interfacing the surface charge governed transportation, and adjusting the electric double layer. So we found in that when we expose, for example, the graphene oxide into a solution containing monovalent, then the DS spacing would be 9.3 angstrom, and whereas that one, when we expose that one to calcium, which is a divalent, the DS spacing reduced substantially to 8.5. And as I said, substantially, maybe in the typical concept, within typical sort of practices, 1 angstrom is not that much, but practically when you're dealing with the separation of lithium from sodium, the 1 angstrom matters a lot, because it's basically the main trick in treating the lithium non-selective membrane to a lithium selective membrane is changing the nanochannel size in angstrom scale. Orbitals also are very important. Basically, the space between the interlayer space was 8.4 angstrom, whereas the effective interlayer space here is around less than that one. So we are basically the orbital, the quantum space matters in a sense that we are dealing with the atom to atom interactions when angstrom size or hydrated ion transfers through the nanochannel membranes. In terms of functional group, it's also important. A low number of functional group does not meet requirements of surface charge governed transportation of ions. A high number of functional group increases the activation energy required for lithium ions to move from one side to the next one. And what we found that the functional group between 10% to 50% is an ideal sort of functional group density for rendering a lithium selective to a membrane. We also found that variation of functional group density and type are more effective when it comes to the separation of lithium ions from divalent cations such as magnesium or calcium cations. Asymmetry is very important, but we found that if you can create sort of asymmetry within the nanochannels of graphene oxide, basically any 2D nanostructure, you can make a non-selective membrane to a lithium exclusive membrane. The other building block that we have tried in my research team is metal organic frameworks. MOFs are great building blocks because of high design tunability, ability to mix and match metal and organic ligands to create this desired pore size and charges. So tunability and cavity size and functional group is the two important features that we can incorporate into MOF to make it lithium selective. Affinity is also important. So what we found that the ion affinity to sulfonated functional group is very important. Using that sort of ion affinity, you can introduce linear polystyrene polymers with abundant sulfonated group. We can make a membrane which shows a high lithium selectivity. We also found that by creating these sort of energy barriers within the MOF nanochannels, we can create a sort of energy baffles within the nanochannels, which alters the movement of ions, and that provides us a sort of selectivity between lithium and sodium. Similar to MOF, COF, covalent organic framework, they are also very nice, very good building blocks for making lithium selective membranes. We found that addition of sulfonated monomers can be used to control membrane pore size and electrolytic interactions, and that substantially increases the lithium ion selectivity. So MaxSyn was another type of covalent metal organic framework that we used. We found that the D spacing in the MaxSyn is critical in rendering the lithium selectivity to the membranes, and then found that the selectivity ratio can increase to 2.5 substantially by altering the D spacing of MaxSyn membranes. And we found that, as you can see here, by changing the D spacing, we can control the way lithium ion moves from one side to the other side within the nanochannels. And that the reason for that is because there is always a sort of competition between the energy barriers within the nanochannels of MaxSyn. There is a competition between the energy barriers, entry energy barriers, for example, of the nanochannels, the energy barriers that exist inside the nanochannels because of the orbital overlaps or electric double layer overlaps of the nanochannel surface walls. In another work, we use clay. Vermiculite is a very nice, very interesting 2D nanochannel that can be used for making nanoselective membranes. And but we found that by reducing the nanochannel size, lithium ion transports in a zigzag fashion. And that's the main reason for that one is because there is a spontaneous symmetry breakage of charge, and that increases and this is because when you reduce the nanochannel size, the water molecules forms a sort of ice-like structure, and that ice-like structure is responsible for creating lithium ion selectivity. The other thing is that so LDH, these are very interesting family of 2D materials, but we found that we can sort of create LDH, and we can induce the regular deposition or self-assembly formation of the LDH layers in order to create nanochannels with a specific surface chemistry which is selected to a specific ions. And again, similar to MAXine, there is always a sort of energy barrier, hydration energy, and binding energy. These three important sort of energy, there is a competition between the entry energy barriers, hydration energy, and binding energy that you can play around to make your membrane lithium or any sort of ion selective membrane. Perovskites, it's a new sort of family of materials that can be used for making lithium selective membranes. But the main, although perovskite also shows very good performance, but what we found that is that they are pH is very sort of the very influential parameter, and by altering a little bit of pH, the membrane shows its loses its selectivity. So that's very important when you're dealing with this type of material that are pH sensitive. So in terms of geometry, so up to here, I talked about how switching from one building block to another, you can tune the ion selectivity and ion conductivity of your material. There are other parameters you can play around to make your membrane lithium selective or any sort of ion selective. Wettability, morphology, charge, energy, and material. So in terms of wettability, what we found that when we use different types of chemical, for example, polydopamine or tannic acid, we managed to get different types of lithium selectivity. And as you can see here, when we incorporate the tannic acid into between the graphene oxide nanochannels, so the tannic acid sort of act like it has a specific cation trap like cron ether. So this cron ether has a specific, very interesting structure, molecular structure, because it only allows a specific ion to sit in the center of the molecule. So in this particular case, we found that the tannic acid has a natural cron ether-like molecular structure which holds lithium and allows other cations to move through. That provides sort of lithium selective membranes. So we also tried to use the tannic acid by MOF and to change or to alter the wettability of the membrane. And what we found that because when you use tannic acid, if you use sort of iron cation, so it creates creates sort of a structure that polyphenol structure provides you with the ability to simultaneously alter the wettability and charge of the membrane to induce ion selectivity. So what we found here is that we compare the results with the polydopamine, and as you can see here, the tannic acid-based membrane showed substantially higher selectivity than polydopamine MOF-based membrane. This is one of our recent work that we published in Advanced Materials, and it's very interesting. So up to here, we realized that, okay, if we want to get a membrane lithium selective, so we have to alter the chemistry and morphology at the same time. So what does chemistry mean? So we need to somehow induce asymmetry in chemistry by altering the functional group, for example, or adding guest molecules, charged guest molecules that can somehow provide either a better or hinder sort of barrier against the movement of lithium. And in terms of morphology, we found that if we can create sort of asymmetrical morphology similar to sand clock, so that sort of asymmetry is very important to induce lithium selectivity. We use a very complex structure, UIO on top of, it's a MOF on the MOF membrane and the UIO with ZIF8 membrane. And what we found that, and then we add the PSS sort of charge. But it is a typical MOF membrane with a selectivity of around about 110. And then once we add the, make the MOF on the MOF membrane, the selectivity increased to about 10 by just altering the morphology. When we add the charge into the structure, the selectivity, because we have a nucleophilic barrier, the selectivity increased substantially to around 80, which is fantastic, because now we have a synergy between the asymmetry in chemistry and morphology. the main reason is that the mechanism behind this sort of high lithium selectivity is that we managed to implant energy surge baffles and energy surge barriers within the nanostructure, and that energy barriers provide an opportunity to manipulate the movement of ions selectively. And as you can see, our membrane not only showed good lithium selectivity, but also it showed rectification. So ionic rectification is very critical because with ionic rectification, you can sort of control the movement of ion with manipulating the polarity of the cell. We also managed to create asymmetry using graphene oxide membranes. And as you can see, our membrane showed a very good selectivity after creating that sort of a sudden reduction in the charge of the graphene oxide. So this sudden reduction in the thickness of the graphene nanoxide provide a great opportunity to boost lithium ion selectivity. So the way it works is we somehow managed to find a way to create a boundary layer. So as you move from graphene oxide to reduced graphene oxide, that creates a sort of sudden reduction in the nanochannel size, and that sudden reduction provides a very good energy surge baffle for against transportation of ions from left to right or right to left. And you can see here, this is the region that has high energy barrier. My student, we tried different types of MOF on the MOF. So we had an idea of, in this work one, she did a great job. The idea was, when we found that when we make a lithium selective membrane, that membrane works very well for a specific brine, whereas if you just change the brine, your membrane doesn't work. It may don't work well as it works with the previous brine. So the idea was how we could make a membrane that can work on the broad range of brines. As you know, if you're moving from one brine from South America to a lake in China, the matrix of or the composition of the brine changes. So you have to find a way to adapt your DLE and your membrane to the new fit conditions. So we found that we somehow managed to make a programmable membrane. So what does the programmable membrane mean? It means that by conditioning the membrane to a specific cation, you can alter the selectivity. Let's say you have a membrane that has high magnesium concentration or high sodium concentration. So you need to condition your membrane by exposing the membrane to a specific cation or anion, and that altered the selectivity. So that was very interesting because before that, we always thinking that, okay, the membrane only can be adapted on a specific brine. Now we found a way to condition the membrane, sort of making the membrane suitable for a different wide range of selectivity, wide range of composition. This is number one. Number two is that, so what we found that currently the main source of impurities for DLE or membrane is sodium or magnesium. There are some, in the West US, there are some resources that have a high concentration of sodium, or in China, there are many sort of resources that have a high concentration of magnesium. So if you could condition the membrane to be used for a specific application and a specific brine without changing the structure or chemistry of membrane, that's something that we are working on. All right, so this is a typical membrane that this is sort of programmable membrane that we worked so far. And as you can see here, by if your membrane has the same membrane can be used for both high concentration of sodium or high concentration of magnesium, and that provides a flexibility to use a specific membrane for a wide range of brines. And the concept comes all into the fact that we can implant or alter the energy within the nanostructure of the membrane by conditioning the membrane with a specific cation. So in this case, for example, we condition membrane with potassium, in here with magnesium. So in another word, Roxon, one of our PhD students, so he's working on using MOF on the MOF membrane to sort of osmotic energy harvesting. So we found that Our membrane, accidentally we found in lab that our MOF-on-the membrane that showed a good lithium selectivity, it can also be used for osmotic energy harvesting. And I showed a very good performance in terms of producing power, in terms of power density and producing energy. Okay, the other one in terms of materials. So the gas molecules are very important because gas molecules can alter interlayer spacing, creating ionic trap and altering passable cavity. So, but we found that when we, if you could somehow incorporate a gas molecule, you can increase the or reduce the nanochannel size, and that provides an opportunity to create ionic trap. And this is, as you can see here, the sulfonate group within the structure of the graphene oxide provide that opportunity to alter create ionic trap, which holds a specific ion and allows the other impurities to go through. And this is what we found, that this is a membrane without cavity, and this is a membrane with nucleophilic barrier within the nanostructure, which alters the structure. Tannic acid. So what we found here that incorporation of tannic acid also could provide a sort of a specific pathway for ions to move through the membrane, and that pathways is a way to manipulate the ionic movement within the nanostructure. So I already covered this one. So in all, if I want to summarize what we found so far, is that for the future of the BLE relies heavily on new advancement in the technologies, and we can't go towards the clean energy future without considering without having a specific technologies with low carbon footprint. And if you want to have a sustainable future, we have to find a way to reduce carbon footprint of producing lithium and lithium-ion batteries as one of the best energy storage systems. And membrane, we believe that membrane has a very bright future, similar to what membrane did in 50s by disrupting the desalination technologies. Reverse osmosis was very disruptive in 50s, 60s, 50s. All of the desalination were based on the thermal-based freshwater production, and it was energy intensive, lots of carbon intensive. In 50s, reverse osmosis came into the planet. It was until 60s or 70s, sorry, 60s or 70s, where the thin film composite membrane came into place and substantially reduced the price of RO. Now it's more than 70% of desalination technologies are based on reverse osmosis, and membrane was very disruptive on that. Similar to freshwater production by desalination, I believe membrane can play a very analogous to desalination, can play very interesting and disruptive play in bringing the new technologies into mineral recovery and energy critical extraction elements. With this, I would like to appreciate all of my colleagues and my PhD students, mentors, everyone who contribute and is still contributing in expanding this field. And thank you for your attention.
Wow, thank you very much, Amir, for your excellent presentation about direct lithium extraction technology, especially lithium extraction using a membrane technology. So now we move into the question and answer session. To the audience, who has any question to Amir, please, you can raise hand, and also you can write your question in the chat room. Okay. In the chat room, we have one question from Mr. Nursaun Sridhar. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation, Dr. Amir. The question is, can battery waste be considered a source for lithium in the future? And can membrane be applied there?
Well, that's a good question. Currently, the amount of batteries spent battery is not enough to meet the industry. Although there are a lot of companies and research are going on the developing technologies, green technologies for extraction of lithium from spent batteries. But in the future, when we have enough feedstock spent batteries, yes, of course. So the idea of membrane is that basically membrane can be used anywhere that lithium is in the aqueous form. So if you have lithium in a solution, therefore membrane can be used. It doesn't matter whether it's a leached lithium from ore-based, spodumene-based, sulfuric-based acid recovery, or based on brine, or based on the leaching of lithium from spent batteries.
Okay, thank you. The second question from the same from Mr. Nusaun Sridhar is the MOP material for direct lithium extraction embedded into a polyamide membrane through interfacial polymerization?
Yeah, no, we didn't use interfacial polymerization. So basically, there are two ways of making the composite MOF-based lithium selective membrane. One way is just, as you mentioned, the making composite or mixed matrix, or using the MOF as a crystal and incorporate MOF into the structure of the membrane. The other one is a thin film MOF. So basically, we make a thin film of MOF on the commercial membrane. So the way we do here is we just have started a project on the MOF mixed matrix lithium selective membranes, whereas those that I have presented here is based on the thin film MOF formation on the surface of the membrane.
Okay, thank you, Amir. There enough question from Mr. Nusan? Okay. Is there any question? Or is there any other question from the audience? If not, I want to ask question to Amir.
Sure, Putu.
Because I also remember that when I did my PhD, I also tried to grow MOF to form some thin film MOF on the surface of polymeric substrate. It's quite difficult. Did you experience any issue on the repeatability of your membrane?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. We already managed to do that. We already have published a paper on, I guess, in material discovery project. I couldn't remember exactly the name, but one of my PhD student, Monire, she and I already presented the work here. So we managed to find a way to create thin film on the surface of a membrane, particularly using polydopamine chemistry and using tannic acid. Yes, you're right. It's challenging because when you have a flexible substrate, so that creates cracks. And cracks is just like a poison to any lithium selective, any sort of ion selective membrane. Remember, we're dealing with the angstrom size ion, so you don't want to see any cracks. But the way that we managed to handle that cracks is by creating a gutter layer underneath of the MOF layer. So that gutter layer provides a sort of flexibility and protection against cracks.
Okay, thank you very much, Amir. Because here in Ubaya, I and my students also still trying to develop a MOF membrane for lithium extraction. I have a PhD student here. So is it possible for us to make like a collaboration with you in terms of MOF membrane or mixed matrix membrane?
Of course, sure.
Lithium extraction. Is it possible, Amir?
100%. Yes, of course. Yeah, I know you put a very long time ago. So when you were doing your PhD at UNSW, so of course, love to collaborate always.
Okay, thank you very much, Amir.
No problem at all.
Is there any other question from audience? that enough? Okay, so I think that's enough for question and answer session for Dr. Amir Ramzu from Edith Cowan University. And so I would like once again say thank you very much for Ludo and Amir, and also for all participants. I think we are already at the end of this webinar today. So to conclude this webinar, I would like to mention several important points from Ludo's and Amir's presentation as follows. From Ludo's presentation, we acknowledge that we face challenges to reduce and treat microplastics, and we have to find suitable treatment techniques. And then we also found that microplastics have been researched and have been found to have toxicity effects to living organisms. So it is very important for us, especially in Indonesia, because Indonesia has so much problem with plastic waste. So I think microplastic issue will be an important topics in the future for Indonesia, not only for the government but also for us in university and also in the community. And from Amir's presentation, I would like to say that in terms of lithium extraction, we really need new lithium recovery that environmentally friendly, such as direct lithium extraction technologies. And one of promising DLE techniques is membrane technology. However, there is still opportunity to improve and find suitable membrane for lithium extraction. I think that's all I would like to conclude for today's webinar. I think we need to give a big applause to both speakers for their excellent information and knowledge. Thank you very much. And I hope that what they presented today will be useful for all of us in order to save our planet from plastic waste and sustain our planet by starting using more friendly material that use lithium as the main materials. And I think that is all for our webinar today, and see you all in other opportunities and other seminar. And thank you very much for the participant. And for Pak Adi from International Office of University of Surabaya, Ubaya. Pak Adi, do you want to say something? Is Pak Adi still here?
Oh, sorry, I think Mr. Adi is on the way to the Ubaya right now.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mbak Sandra, for hosting this webinar today. And once again, thank you very much, Amir and Ludo, for your presentation today. And we hope that Ubaya can extend a collaboration with you in the future in terms of research and any other activities to improve our research activities and also other activities. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much. See you next time. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Mbak Sandra. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much. Izin live ya.
Silakan Bu Natalia, terima
Ya.
kasih.
Thank you.
Ini Bu Pat dan Mbak Dewi tanya apakah ada presensi. Sepertinya dari International Office sepertinya tidak menyediakan. Mungkin nanti bisa apa namanya? You can also if you want to contact the international office, you can also just contact them directly, because the host is the international office of the Ubaya. Thank you very much, all. See you. I will end the